Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the studio chair. The lights above him were bright, but he did not seem to mind. He had been in the spotlight for most of his life, yet he always carried himself in a gentle, humble way. That night was no different. The cameras were rolling, the host smiled, and the audience waited for him to speak. The host began with the usual questions. They talked about movies, his past roles, and the exciting projects coming in the future. Keanu answered with calm words, his voice low but clear. People always said he had a way of making even the busiest room feel calm, as if time slowed down when he spoke. Then, almost out of nowhere, the host leaned forward with a curious smile. "Keanu," he asked, "what are you looking for in your next wife?" The question surprised everyone. Some people in the audience laughed softly, others gasped. It was a bold and personal question. Many stars would have avoided it or laughed it off. But Keanu didn't. He leaned back in his chair, looked thoughtful, and then nodded as if he had been waiting for a chance to speak about this. He paused for a moment. His hands rested on his lap, and his eyes looked down as if he was searching for the right words. The room grew quiet. You could hear the faint sound of cameras clicking, but even the host leaned back, giving him space. Finally, Keanu lifted his head. His expression was calm but serious. He spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. "You know," he said, "I don't think about it the way people might expect. I'm not looking for perfection, not beauty, not glamour. What I'm looking for is something very simple." The host tilted his head, curious. The audience leaned closer, waiting. Keanu's voice carried a soft weight, the kind that made people listen deeply. "I want someone I can laugh with," he said. "Someone who enjoys the small things like burnt toast in the morning, or walking together in silence. I want honesty. I want loyalty. I want kindness." The audience stayed quiet, hanging on his every word. This wasn't the answer they had expected. They thought he might joke, or talk about Hollywood love stories, but he didn't. Instead, he shared something real, something raw. He continued, "Fame fades. Looks change. But what stays is how someone treats you, how someone makes you feel. What I'm looking for in my next wife is a partner, a friend, someone who doesn't need the world to see our love because we feel it in the little moments." There was a long pause after his words. The host nodded slowly, touched by the honesty. The audience clapped softly, not the loud cheers of excitement, but the gentle kind of applause that meant respect. For Keanu, this wasn't just a question. It was something he had thought about deeply. His life had been filled with challenges, and he knew what mattered most. He wasn't chasing fairy tales, he was searching for peace, for truth. The cameras zoomed in on his face. His eyes looked both strong and gentle. He didn't rush his words. He let them breathe, as if he wanted every person listening to truly understand. "Love," he said softly, "is not about big gestures. It's not about diamonds or fancy dinners. It's about being there when you're tired, when you're sad, when you're not at your best. It's about sitting on the couch, holding hands, and knowing you are safe." Some people in the audience wiped their eyes. His words had touched them in ways they hadn't expected. They came for entertainment, but what they received was a lesson, a truth many had forgotten. The host smiled gently. "That's beautiful," he said. "You know, Keanu, people often see you as mysterious, as someone who keeps his personal life very private. Why share this now?" Keanu thought for a moment, then replied, "Because I think the world forgets sometimes. We live in a time when people are chasing pictures, chasing likes, chasing things that don't last. But what lasts is kindness. What lasts is patience. I want to remind people of that. And maybe," he added with a small smile, "maybe my future wife is listening somewhere too." The room filled with warm laughter. Not mocking laughter, but the kind that comes from shared understanding. Even the host chuckled, touched by the sincerity. Keanu leaned back again, this time more relaxed. He had opened his heart, and the audience had received it with grace. He didn't feel embarrassed or exposed. Instead, he seemed at peace, as if speaking these truths was part of his own healing. Behind the cameras, crew members exchanged glances. They had worked with countless stars, but few moments had ever felt so genuine. It wasn't just an interview anymore, it was something memorable, something people would carry with them. Later, when the interview ended, the world outside the studio buzzed. Clips of Keanu's words began spreading online. People shared them on social media, writing captions about how love should be real, how relationships should be built on simple truths. His words touched not only fans but also strangers who barely knew his movies. But in that moment, inside the studio, Keanu wasn't thinking about the world outside. He was simply a man speaking from the heart. A man who had lived through joy and sorrow, who knew the difference between shallow love and deep connection. As the lights dimmed and the cameras turned off, the host shook his hand warmly. "Thank you, Keanu," he said. "You didn't just answer a question, you gave us something to think about." Keanu smiled politely, nodded, and left the stage. He walked slowly, his steps calm, his presence quiet. But the words he left behind stayed echoing in the room, carried in the hearts of everyone who had listened. The audience filed out, still talking about what they had heard. One woman whispered to her friend, "I wish more people thought like that. It's so rare." Another man said softly, "He just said what we all feel but never say out loud." And somewhere in the city, perhaps even across the world, someone who heard those words felt them deeply. Maybe she smiled to herself, thinking, "That's the kind of man I've been waiting for." For Keanu, it was not about impressing anyone. It was about telling the truth. And the truth, spoken softly that night, was powerful enough to move millions. Keanu Reeves had already surprised the world when he spoke about what he wanted in his next wife. His answer was not about beauty or fame, but about kindness, honesty, and simple moments. People were touched, but that was just the beginning. In the days after the interview, many wanted to know more. They wanted to understand what he truly valued and why he believed simplicity mattered so much. Keanu had always been known as a man who lived differently from other stars. While many celebrities enjoyed fast cars, luxury homes, and expensive vacations, he was often seen riding the subway, waiting in line at coffee shops, or walking through the streets without security. For him, life was not about showing off, it was about living quietly and meaningfully. When reporters asked him again about his answer, he smiled and explained further. "I think happiness is in the little things," he said. "A simple dinner at home, a quiet walk in the park, or just laughing together over nothing, that's what matters to me. That's the kind of relationship I want." People listened carefully, because in those words they felt truth. Many had forgotten that love was not about social media posts or glamorous pictures. Keanu's words reminded them that love is not performance, it is presence. He spoke about how laughter was important to him. "If I can laugh with her," he said softly, "then I know we can get through anything. Laughter can heal, even on the hardest days. I want someone who can share those laughs, not just when life is easy, but when it is difficult too." The world began to notice how unusual his view was in Hollywood. Stars often spoke of love in terms of big events, expensive weddings, romantic trips, or grand gifts. But Keanu's vision of love was different. It was quiet, steady, and deeply human. He described loyalty as one of his most important values. He said loyalty wasn't only about staying together, but about standing by each other's side in every situation. "I don't want someone who runs when things get hard," he said. "I want someone who will hold my hand when the storm comes." These words reached people around the world. Social media was filled with clips of him saying them. Some shared stories of their grandparents, who had been together for decades and who lived in the way Keanu described, sharing tea in the mornings, walking together in the evenings, and choosing each other every single day. His words reminded people of a love that lasts, not just a love that shines for a short time. Keanu's idea of simplicity wasn't about living without joy. It was about finding joy in small details. He told one reporter about a moment he cherished, sitting on a balcony, drinking tea, watching the sunset with someone he loved. That, he said, is more beautiful to me than the most expensive vacation. People admired how he looked at life. They said he seemed to carry wisdom, as if his experiences had taught him truths that many had overlooked. His life had been filled with both great success and deep sadness, and those experiences had shaped his heart into something gentle but strong. For many, his words became more than just a celebrity's opinion. They became advice. Couples began talking to each other, asking themselves if they were really focusing on what mattered. People in relationships shared Keanu's words with their partners, saying, "This is what love should feel like." In the following weeks, Keanu was asked about relationships again during another event. A journalist smiled and said, "People are saying you gave the world free marriage advice. Do you agree?" Keanu laughed softly, shaking his head. "No, I'm not giving advice. I'm just sharing what I've learned. We all go through life differently. But for me, the little things matter most. I think we sometimes forget that love is not about showing the world, it's about showing up for each other." That moment once again drew applause. His words were simple, yet they carried so much meaning. What made him even more respected was that he lived by the same values he spoke about. Fans often shared stories of him offering his subway seat to strangers, or quietly helping others without seeking attention. People said, "He is not only talking about kindness, he is practicing it." This was why his words about finding a wife touched so many hearts. They believed him, because he lived with honesty. He wasn't selling a dream, he was sharing his truth. In another interview, he described the kind of conversations he wanted with his future wife. "I want to be able to talk about everything, and also talk about nothing. To sit in silence and still feel connected. That's the kind of bond one value." Audiences found this especially touching. In a world full of noise, endless updates, and constant messages, the idea of finding comfort in silence felt refreshing. People began sharing quotes from him, "Love is in the quiet moments." One magazine wrote an article about how Keanu had started a new conversation about relationships. Instead of focusing on romance as a performance, people were talking about it as a partnership. Couples were asking themselves if they were being present for each other, if they were laughing enough, if they were being patient. Keanu's words also inspired those who were single. Many people admitted they had been chasing the wrong things: appearance, status, or excitement. After hearing him, they began to rethink what they truly wanted in a partner. Some said they would start looking for someone who made them feel safe, someone who shared their values, not just someone who looked good on paper. His interviews became more than entertainment, they became lessons. Not only about love, but about life itself. When asked again if he was actively searching for his next wife, he gave a small smile. "I'm not searching," he said. "I believe the right person will come when the time is right. Until then, I'll live with patience and gratitude." Those words showed his calm and grounded nature. He wasn't desperate, he wasn't chasing. He was living, trusting, and waiting. That patience became another lesson for the world. People admired him more than ever, not only for his movies, but for his heart. In a world where celebrities often lived fast and loud, Keanu lived slow and quiet. His idea of love, filled with laughter, loyalty, and simplicity, was not just refreshing, it was inspiring. And so, in the weeks after that famous interview, Keanu Reeves had unknowingly started a movement. A movement of people remembering that true love is not found in grand gestures but in the simple act of being there, Every single day. Sparkles. That's part 2 fully expanded, about 1,300 words, in simple English, engaging, and clean. Do you want me to move on and expand part 3 in the same way? You said, part 3, KO expand crow without heading 1,300 words my in simple English words. It should be interesting, and every part should be engaging so the audience doesn't get bored. And don't use any violated word. Obviate any violated content. ChatGPT said, perfect white heavy check mark. Here's the expanded part 3 of what I'm looking for in my next wife. Keanu Reeves. It's written in simple English, around 1,300 words, with smooth storytelling, short paragraphs, and no inappropriate content. Keanu Reeves had already spoken about what he wanted in his next wife. He had shared his belief in simplicity, in laughter, in loyalty, and in quiet moments. But there was another layer to his story, something deeper. To understand why he valued these things so much, he spoke about the lessons life had taught him. Keanu was not a man who lived without pain. His life, though filled with fame and success, had also been touched by loss. He had known grief in ways that most people could not imagine. And it was through those experiences that his heart had learned what really mattered. In one conversation, when asked why he valued kindness so deeply, he paused and said, because I know how much it hurts when kindness is missing. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had walked through shadows and still chosen to stand in the light. He spoke about patience. Life doesn't always give you what you want right away, he explained. It teaches you to wait. And sometimes, it makes you wait longer than you think you can. But in waiting, you learn who really stands beside you. These words revealed why he didn't search for flashy love stories. He wasn't looking for excitement that burned quickly and then faded. He wanted the steady flame, the one that survives storms and still burns through the night. Keanu also admitted that he wasn't perfect. I have flaws, he said softly. I can be quiet for too long, lost in thought. I can be slow to open up. But I hope that my future wife will understand my silences as much as my words. That honesty touched people. It showed he wasn't pretending to be flawless. He was a human being, just like everyone else. He carried scars, both seen and unseen. And it was those scars that had shaped his values. During one interview, the host asked him, do you think your past pain has made you more careful about love? Keanu thought for a moment. Then he replied, yes. Pain teaches you. It shows you what is fragile and what is strong. It teaches you to appreciate small joys, because you know how easily they can disappear. And it teaches you that love is not about avoiding pain, it's about having someone to hold when it comes. The room grew quiet after those words. People felt his sincerity. They saw that his vision of love was not built from fairy tales, but from real life, from both joy and sorrow. Many fans admired how he turned his struggles into lessons. Instead of becoming bitter, he had become wiser, gentler. Instead of closing his heart, he kept it open, even though it had been broken before. That strength inspired millions. Keanu often described how he valued presence over perfection. I don't need someone who has all the answers, he said. I just need someone who is there. Sometimes presence means more than words. This lesson came from his own life. He remembered moments when silence had been the most comforting thing, when someone simply sitting beside him had brought more peace than any advice. It was this kind of love he wished for. People began to see that what Keanu wanted in his next wife was not a list of demands, but a reflection of the lessons life had given him. Each value he mentioned, kindness, patience, loyalty, was connected to something he had lived, something he had felt deeply. One magazine article described him as a man who has turned his pain into poetry. His words were not dramatic, but they were real. And that realness touched hearts across the world. When asked about forgiveness, Keanu's answer was just as powerful. Forgiveness is necessary, he said. We all make mistakes. We all fail sometimes. But love means giving another chance, because you know the heart behind the mistake. That statement became widely shared. People admired how he didn't expect perfection, even in relationships. He expected humanity. He believed that mistakes were not the end of love, but an opportunity to grow stronger together. His reflections also gave hope to people who had been through pain themselves. Many wrote online that his words helped them heal, reminding them that scars do not make someone unlovable. In fact, scars make love deeper, because they show survival. Keanu also spoke about time. I've learned that love is not about rushing, he said. It's about giving time, giving patience. Some things can't be forced. The best things grow slowly. Fans said this was one of his most beautiful lessons. In a world where everything was fast, his words reminded them that love is like a tree, it needs time, care, and patience to grow strong. One evening, during a quiet press event, someone asked him if he still believed in marriage. His answer was soft but firm. Yes, he said. I believe in marriage, but not as a contract or an event. I believe in marriage as a promise. A promise to walk together, even when the road is hard. A promise to choose each other again and again. That answer received a long round of applause. People respected him not only as an actor but as a man who spoke with wisdom and depth. In the weeks after, countless fans shared their own stories. Some said they had been married for decades and saw their love in the way Keanu described it. Others said they were single but now had a new way of looking at relationships. Keanu's reflections showed that his search for a wife was not about filling a space beside him. It was about finding someone who shared his values, someone who understood the lessons of life just as deeply. He wasn't searching for fairy tales. He was searching for truth. And that truth was made of patience, forgiveness, presence, and love that endures. As he walked away from another interview one evening, the reporters were still talking about his words. One of them said quietly, "You know, he doesn't just answer questions, he teaches us how to live." And maybe that was the most powerful part of all. Keanu Reeves was not simply telling the world what he wanted in his next wife. He was reminding everyone what love, at its core, should truly mean. When Keanu Reeves spoke about love, the world listened. His words were not loud, but they carried weight. They were not dressed in fancy language, but they were filled with honesty. After his interviews began spreading across social media, people everywhere started to talk about him not just as a movie star, but as a man with wisdom about life and relationships. Clips of him speaking were shared again and again. Short videos with his quotes filled the internet. People wrote captions like, "This is what love should be," or "Keanu Reeves just explained marriage better than any expert." Some even called his words a gentle reminder that in a noisy world, the quiet truth still mattered. It was not only fans who reacted. Journalists, writers, and relationship counselors began to discuss his views. Articles appeared in magazines and blogs, praising the way he shifted the conversation. They said he reminded people that relationships are not about showing the world how perfect you look together but about building trust and care behind closed doors. One writer explained, "In just a few minutes, Keanu did what books and seminars try to do. He reminded us of the essence of love." Even on television, hosts replayed the clip of him talking about laughter, loyalty, and simple moments. They discussed how unusual it was for a star of his level to open up in such a raw, gentle way. Instead of scandal or gossip, his words created inspiration and hope. Everywhere people turned, they saw his face and heard his words. But more than that, they felt something change in their hearts. His message had started something bigger than an interview. It became a message to the world. Couples began having conversations they had avoided for years. A husband and wife in their 50s admitted that Keanu's words about laughter made them realize they had stopped laughing together. That night, they promised to find joy in the small things again. A young woman wrote online that she had always dreamed of grand romance, but Keanu's words made her realize she should search for someone who would sit with her in silence and still feel close. She said she would no longer chase perfect pictures, but instead look for real presence. Even single parents found hope in his words. One man wrote that he used to believe he could never find love again after heartbreak, but Keanu's honesty showed him that love is still possible when you focus on what matters most. For many, it was not just what Keanu said, but how he said it. His calm, steady voice, his thoughtful pauses, his humble smile, it all made his words feel alive, as if they came straight from his soul. Soon, Keanu's words began appearing on posters, quotes, and even wedding vows. Couples started including his lines in their ceremonies, promising each other the same kind of simple, patient, and loyal love he described. Some even said, if Keanu believes this kind of love is worth waiting for, then so do we. In the middle of all this attention, Keanu stayed quiet, as he always did. He didn't chase the headlines. He didn't make long statements. He simply continued to live as he had always lived, calmly, kindly, without trying to impress anyone. But the world didn't stop talking. More interviews followed, and each time, people asked him again about his views on love. Instead of changing his answers to please the crowd, he repeated the same truths. Kindness, he said, patience, laughter, loyalty, these are the things that matter. Everything else will fade. It became clear that he wasn't saying these things to sound wise. He truly lived by them. That honesty made the world believe him even more. Some celebrities even commented on his words. A few said they agreed with his idea of love. Others admitted they felt challenged by it, because it showed them how often relationships in their industry were built on appearances rather than truth. But Keanu didn't judge anyone. He simply shared his heart. And that was enough to change the way people thought. One evening, at a public event, a journalist asked him, "Do you realize that your words about love have gone viral worldwide? That people are quoting you in their marriages and relationships?" Keanu gave a small smile and shook his head. "I didn't expect that," he said quietly. "I was just sharing what I feel. If it helps someone, then I'm grateful." That answer showed once again who he truly was. He wasn't trying to be a teacher. He wasn't trying to be a leader. He was simply being himself. Yet, by being himself, he had become an example for millions. The impact was so strong that even universities and counseling centers began discussing his words. Some professors used his interviews as material in classes about relationships and communication. They explained how simple truths, when spoken with sincerity, can change lives. Everywhere, people felt touched. And yet, for Keanu, it was not about the fame or the attention. It was about honesty. His message was not, "Follow me." His message was, "Remember what love really is." He often reminded people that relationships are not easy. Love, he said in one interview, is not about never having problems. It's about choosing to face those problems together. That's what makes it strong. These words carried even more weight because of who he was. Keanu was not just a man of success, he was a man of struggles, a man who had faced loss and pain, and yet chose to remain kind. His life gave power to his words. In the end, Keanu's message to the world was simple but powerful. He showed that love does not need to be perfect, it needs to be true. It doesn't need to be big, it needs to be steady. And it doesn't need to be loud, it needs to be real. As his interviews continued to spread, people began to say that Keanu Reeves had given the world a gift, a reminder that the best love stories are not written on screens or in magazines, but in quiet kitchens, during long walks, in shared laughter, and in silent moments of peace. And somewhere, maybe even listening quietly from afar, was someone who heard his words and felt them deeply. Someone who thought, "That is the kind of man I would walk beside." The interview that had started with simple questions about movies had turned into something unforgettable. Keanu Reeves had shared his heart with the world. He had spoken about simplicity, loyalty, patience, and laughter. He had shown that love was not about perfection but about presence. And now, as the conversation drew to its close, the audience waited to hear his final thoughts. Keanu smiled softly, the kind of smile that felt both shy and wise. "I'm not in a rush," he said gently. "Life has already taught me that rushing brings nothing good. I believe the right soul will arrive at the right time. Until then, I want to live with gratitude and peace." The host leaned forward, impressed. "So you're not searching?" he asked. Keanu shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I think love finds us when we least expect it. You can't force it. You can't schedule it. It just comes, and when it comes, you'll know." The room was silent again, as if everyone needed a moment to let his words settle. The audience looked at him not just as a star, but as a man who had lived through joy and pain, and still believed in love. Keanu continued, "I want a love that feels natural. A love where I don't have to try to be someone else. A love where silence feels safe, and presence feels enough. That's the love I hope to find." The host smiled warmly. "That sounds like something many people are searching for too," he said. Keanu nodded. "Maybe. But I think we all need reminders. We live in a world that tells us love must look perfect. But it doesn't. Love is not a picture, it's a practice. It's not what you show others, it's what you give to each other." Those words received soft applause again. Not the loud kind, but the heartfelt kind. People clapped because they agreed, because they had felt the truth in their own lives. When the cameras turned off, many in the studio whispered to one another. Some said they had never heard such wisdom in such few words. Others said they would go home and hug their partners tighter that night. But for Keanu, it wasn't about the applause. It wasn't about going viral. It was about telling the truth. He left the studio quietly, as he always did, without seeking attention. Yet his words followed everyone who had heard them. In the days that followed, stories poured in from around the world. A young couple wrote that they had been fighting, but after watching Keanu's interview, they decided to sit down, talk honestly, and start again. An elderly woman said she wished her late husband could have heard Keanu's words, because they reflected exactly how they had lived: simple meals, quiet walks, endless laughter. Even those who had given up on love found themselves thinking again. Keanu's patience and hope showed them that it was never too late, never impossible. Love was always waiting somewhere, if only people were open to it. Magazines called his words the quiet hope. They said he reminded the world that love was not about drama, but about steady companionship. His thoughts became more than a celebrity quote, they became part of a movement. And yet, Keanu never tried to own that movement. He never declared himself a teacher or expert. He stayed humble, repeating that he was simply sharing what he believed. That humility made his message even more powerful. One evening, at another public event, a fan shouted from the crowd, "Keanu, I hope you find your wife soon." The audience laughed warmly. Keanu smiled back and raised his hand in a gentle wave. "Thank you," he said. "But I think life has its own timing. Until then, I'll keep living, keep learning, and keep laughing." Those few words once again showed his heart. He wasn't desperate, he wasn't restless. He was hopeful. He believed in love, but he believed in patience too. As time passed, his words continued to echo in people's lives. Relationship counselors shared his clips with couples. Families quoted him during dinners. Young people used his lines in letters to those they loved. He had given the world something timeless, a reminder that love, at its best, is honest, patient, and kind. In quiet moments, Keanu himself reflected on what he had shared. He knew the world had listened, but for him, it was more personal. His life had shown him pain, but also beauty. and through it all, he had chosen to keep his heart open. That choice, more than anything else, was the secret to his hope. For the world, he had become a voice of reason, a symbol of gentle wisdom. But at the core, he was just a man waiting for someone who could walk beside him, someone who could sit with him in silence and still feel close. As people remembered his words, they realized something important. The story was not only about Keanu Reeves and what he wanted in his next wife. It was about everyone. It was about what we all want deep down: connection, loyalty, laughter, and peace. And so, while Keanu walked quietly through life, his message lived loudly in the hearts of millions. Somewhere, maybe in a cafe, maybe on a train, maybe in another quiet room across the world, there could be someone who would one day hear his words and think, that is the man I want to walk with. Until that day, Keanu Reeves carried on, not searching, not rushing, but living. And in living, he showed the world that love is not found in fairy tales, it is found in truth. It is found in kindness. It is found in the quiet hope of waiting for the right soul, at the right time.